Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. So with Fire Mage looking so great in this raid, a lot of people in my guild are looking to play it, and I actually did kind of like a seminar for my guild to teach people how to start as Fire Mage, and I thought, you know what, it'd actually be kind of good to upload this to YouTube. So what you're about to see is the presentation that I gave my guild on how to play Fire Mage, and we're going to be talking about some new things in here that you might not know since they've been kind of figured out since my last video. So consider this an update for that video, and you also might find out some tips and tricks that you didn't know about from that as well. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and play the video now. As always, if you like the video, be sure to like and also subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Welcome to the Velocity Mage Workshop 2025. Today you're going to learn how to play Fire Mage. Okay, so what is the main goal of Fire Mage? Basically, we want to get this, Hot Streak. Get as many hot streaks and spend as many as possible, and everything else that we do as a Fire Mage relates to this goal. So every spec has a hero talent that kind of has a secondary goal introduces, but with Sunfury it's actually just the same goal because we have Spellfire Spheres here, which every 6 times we consume a hot streak, we're going to get a sphere, so there's a big incentive there. We also get haste from it. And then the big thing is this buff right here, Glorious Incandescence. So whenever we get our 6th, we get Burden of Power, which is a damage increase. We track this, but not for the damage. We track this because we want to know when the Glorious Incandescence is coming, and it's always going to be the one right afterwards. All right, so how do we generate Hot Streak? Well, we have the usual suspects here. Mainly it's Fireblast, but also Phoenix Flames. We also have our builders like Scorch, Fireball, and also Spenders, which are Pyroblast and Flamestrike. And combustion is a big contributor to how we generate hot streaks. So having combustion uptime is really, really big. So let's talk about how you get combustion cooldown reduction. So there's 3 main ways, and then with the tier bonus introduces a 4th way. So Kindling just gives you 1 second of cooldown reduction for every crit, and that is always happening. We also have Unleashed Inferno, which is giving us cooldown reduction, but only during combustion. So during combustion, you have to be locked in, because if you aren't, then you're going to miss out on a lot of cooldown reduction. In fact, whenever you're inside of combustion, you should be generating basically half of the cooldown, if not more, towards your next one. And also during combustion, we have Fiery Rush, which basically makes it so that our Fire Blasts and our Phoenix Flames are recharging faster. So since this is a percentage amount and Glorious Incandescence is like a flat amount, it's really, really good. It basically means every time we get a GI proc, we're going to get back all of our Fire Blasts. And then our tier bonus 2 set gives us cooldown reduction as well. It's just a flat 6 seconds on every combustion, but we also have a chance to proc 2 seconds off our combustion as well. So tier is really good. Okay, so basically this whole thing is a giant cycle, right? We want more combustion uptime, which is going to lead to more builders, which leads to more hot streaks, which leads to more damage, and more cooldown reduction, which leads to more combustion uptime. It's very important that you're always hitting something, okay? Because if you disrupt this cycle, fire is all about momentum. You need to keep the momentum up, or else you're not going to be able to basically get your next combustion in time. Very common question or problem that I hear in coaching is, I feel like I don't have any resources. I feel like I'm spending too long outside of combustion. The tier helps with this, but it's not going to fix it completely. You have to fix how you're doing combustion to do this properly. Okay, so let's talk about the rotation. So we start with combustion, right? And we always want to enter combustion with a double pyroblast. And then once we're inside of our combustion, it's just builder, spender, repeat, right? So here's an example of an opener here from Warcraft Logs. And as you can see, they enter here Scorch with combustion, and then Fireblast, and then double pyroblast. This is a new thing, by the way. We're going to be using Scorch just full time to enter combustion. So anytime we have combustion ready, you are not just pressing combustion, okay? You are casting a spell, and then when the spell is about to end, or maybe, halfway through if you're not very good at doing it at the end, then you're doing your combustion Fireblast, and then you're queuing the Pyroblast. It's very important that you queue the Pyroblast from it, because if you don't queue the Pyroblast, you're not going to get the double Pyroblast. So if you're having trouble with getting the timing down, just do it earlier, and then as you get better with it, then you can start scooching the combustion Fireblast and then queued Pyroblast later. And when it comes to Hyperthread wrist wraps, you're going to use those after you use your last Fireblast. So you can see here, we do Scorch, and then Combustion Fireblast, Double Pyroblast, Fireblast, Fireblast, Bracers, Pyroblast. It's very important that your last 3 spells, whenever you use the Bracers, that you have 2 Fireblasts in there. It doesn't care if the spell has a cooldown or not. It's going to try to reduce the cooldown regardless. So if you only do 1 Fireblast, let's say I did the Pyroblast first and then I Bracered, I would only get half the value in that case, right? We want to get the full 10 seconds. And then after that, it's just a matter of, just basically cycling through your builders until you're out and then moving on. After combustion ends, we have the next cycle, which is Hyperthermia. We're transitioning into that, and that's just spam Pyroblast. And you're going to Fireblast sometimes. We'll talk about when you do that. But you are going to throw in a couple Fire Blasts in there. Now, make sure that whenever you do this, you are not munching a Hot Streak. You are converting Heating Ups into Hot Streaks. Very important. And then we have our Shifting Power once Hyperthermia is over. This is not necessarily always going to follow Hyperthermia. Sometimes you'll go straight back into Combustion. But let's say that you're not in Bloodlust, or maybe you don't have the tier bonus. You'll very often find yourself having more than 20 seconds on your Combustion. And we're looking to Shifting Power outside of our cooldowns. And whenever we do not have a proc up, right? So no time anomaly, no Hyperthermia. And we also don't want a Hot Streak. Very important. Whenever you're shifting power, there's a high chance you're going to need a Fire Blast at some point during that shifting power. You don't want to have a Hot Streak in your hands because you can't Fire Blast, right? That would make you munch a heating up. So we want to go into shifting power without any Hot Streak. We can have nothing. We can have heating up. That's fine. Just no Hot Streak. And the goal here is just we're trying to get cooldown reduction on Fire Blast and Combustion. That's the main thing, but we also can get cooldown reduction on Phoenix Flames and other stuff, which is nice, right? But mainly it's Fire Blast and Combustion that we care about. And then once we exit that, if there is time between the combustions, that's our filler, aka the Combustion Waiting Room. And during that, we're basically looking to spend our Phoenix Flames first. That's the first thing at the top of the ticket. And then below that, we're looking to use Fire Blast during a Fireball to convert a heating up into a Hot Streak. So you can actually use Fire Blast without casting Fireball. It just depends on your resources. But unless you're capping out on resources, you want to be casting the Fireball, using the Fire Blast during that Fireball, converting it into a Hot Streak, and then spending the Pyroblast with the Fireball. If you have two spells hit at the same time, there's a grace period. So we're basically fixing the odds, and we're getting extra chance to get a heating up by doing that. This is called Pyro Fishing. So this is only true outside of execute range. Whenever you're in execute range, you use Scorch instead of Fireball. So don't worry about it in that case. You don't want to set it up this way. You would just Scorch into a Pyroblast. But basically the big things here are we don't want to cap out on resources, and we want to react to procs because they're going to get a lot of procs, right? Hyperthermia, time anomaly, you want to react really quickly to those. So make sure that you are aware that that's happening. If you're missing it and you notice a lot in your VOD, make sure you add a sound or something to it. You don't want to miss those Hyperthermia and TA procs. And then whenever combustion is coming up in about 10 seconds, if it looks like our resources are a bit low, we might pool. Now, this is not always the case, right? Sometimes you're not going to pool just because your resources are already good. But, if you're low on resources, make sure you're pooling 10 seconds out of the cooldown of combustion. It will come up faster than 10 seconds, though, just so you know. Like 10 seconds out means usually about 6 seconds out in reality. So the gameplay loop is simple, right? We start with combustion. We're locked the fuck in during combustion. Any mistake you make during this portion right here is going to add time. Basically, this whole purple part is the path of shame. All right, we don't want to take the path of shame, and we shouldn't take it. The only time we'll have to wait out this part of the combustion cooldown, because this is 2 minutes, this whole loop, right? Half of it is going to be reduced during the combustion, guaranteed. And then depending on your situation with like tier and RNG with procs and just like haste and other things like that, you might reduce it further. That's what these other colors are right here. But basically the idea is we're in combustion, we're locked in, we basically cut out this entire purple portion during this combustion, and then we move on to hyperthermia, and during hyperthermia we're cutting off one of these because we're getting cooldown reduction during the hyperthermia, and then the shifting power is additionally giving us 12 seconds off of the cooldown reduction. So, I mean, with the tier bonus, like you can realistically go combustion, hyperthermia, right back into combustion, you can loop in right away. Or you might have to take a longer path, right? It just depends, but we should always be looping back in at least halfway, unless something is going very wrong. It's very important in Mythic Plus that you don't use combustion if you won't be able to get the whole combustion off on the pack. Because if you have your targets die and you're still inside the combustion, you are going to have to take at least a portion of the path of shame here. And you don't want that. So there are some pulls where it's unavoidable, and you either have to just like not use combustion at all, or if you use it, you're going to be screwed no matter what. Theater of Pain is really bad with this, especially whenever you're in the gauntlet part, whenever you're flying from platform to platform. But other than that, in most cases, if you are doing a key of moderate level, 6 or higher, it's not really too big of an issue. Okay, Double Pyroblast. So we enter every combustion with Double Pyroblast. This is how it works. We start the cast. We press Combustion Fireblast during the cast. Okay, now in this case, I had a heating up coming into it. Okay, so if I have a heating up coming in, I'm going to convert into a hot streak here. That means I can cue the Pyroblast from the end of the cast. Both the cast goes off and the Pyroblast that we queued, right? So this is 2 spells. 1, 2. That gives us a hot streak, so we can do a second Pyroblast. Here's how it looks. So whenever you're casting, you begin to Scorch, Combustion Fireblast, Pyroblast, Pyroblast. This is the first thing where things could go wrong. If you're doing your rotation and you're like, I don't understand why I feel so low on resources, it's probably that you're screwing this up. Definitely make sure that you watch yourself and see that you're actually casting 2 Pyroblasts in a row. Very, very important that we start every combustion like this. Now, you can also use Fireball, right? This is Scorch, but Fireball is fine too. Like, if you're casting a Fireball and then, let's say you get like a tier proc at the last second and Combustion suddenly off cooldown, just go ahead and use that Combustion Fireblast and then cue the Pyroblast from it. Okay, so inside of Combustion, our priority is just we want to use Builder Spender, right? But the first one is obviously Pyroblast with Hot Streak because we're not wanting to munch those. But when it comes to builders, how we're getting the heating up to turn to a Hot Streak, we're looking at Fireblast first and foremost is by far our best. And below that, we have Scorch if we need to refresh the improved Scorch, but you don't want to use too many Scorches. Scorch does no damage, so you're basically just trying to like game it and refresh it at the very last second if possible and execute. Below that, we have Phoenix Flames, and then below that, we have Scorch, which is the bottom of the barrel, only used in emergencies. And then again, for the bracers, right, whenever you're doing the Scorch, Combustion Fireblast, Double Pyroblast, you're using the bracers after your last Fireblast here. That should give you back at least 2 Fireblasts, which gives you a little runway. Now, very important, while you're in Combustion, Burden of Power, that is something that you need to be aware of because it's going to turn into Glorious Incandescence, and Glorious Incandescence is consumed with a Fireblast. You have to have a Fireblast to consume Glorious Incandescence. So what will often happen is like by the time it comes up, depending on your haste levels, you might have it be where like you don't have a Fireblast to consume the Glorious Incandescence. And since you only have like 4 seconds left of Combustion, let's say, it takes about 2 seconds for the meteorites to fall and for you to get your cooldown reduction on the Fireblast. So it could be the situation where like by the time it comes up and you use the Fireblast on the Glorious Incandescence, you might just get those Fireblasts after Combustion. That is really bad. We want to make sure that the Glorious Incandescence is used right away. So basically, my tip for you is like keep a Fireblast in your pocket whenever you see the Burden of Power. Try not to proc the Hot Streak that you're going to use on the Burden of Power with the Fireblast if you only have one. Use a Phoenix Flame instead, and that way you can Fireblast right away once you get the Glorious Incandescence, and you can get the return during the Combustion. You can get 2 more Fireblasts in that Combustion, 2 more Pyroblasts afterwards. With Fireblast, as you can see here, the cadence of Pyroblasting, it's twice as much, right? With the Phoenix Flame, it takes a global. So we only get half the value here compared to whenever we're just Pyroblasting back to back to back here. It's very front-loaded, so you get a lot of cooldown reduction from this, right? If you add in 2 more of these to your Combustion, you're basically shaving off like 10 seconds towards the next Combustion. So it's really important that you get that down. When it comes to shifting power, you basically just want to use shifting power whenever it feels right. There's like rules for it, but it's not set because there's so much RNG involved and tier is a consideration. And also, you should consider like AoE as well, right? Because like scenario, let's say, is sticks. So we're doing sticks and you do your Combustion and you do another Combustion, and let's say that there's like an ad set coming up. You might be able to get your Combustion to line up better with the ads if you hold the shifting power for a moment and then send the Combustion and then use the shifting power afterwards to get the cooldown reduction between those 2 Combustions. That way you can get the AoE off and you can spread the Ignite onto the ads. So you're always just thinking ahead, like how do I line up my Combustions? And if it makes sense to send the shifting power later, then do that. But the rule is just you do it outside of Combustion. You do it outside of Hyperthermia. You have no Hot Streak when you do it. And Fireblast and Combustion must be on cooldown whenever you press the button. Now, if you use shifting power and you get a proc, like a TA proc, Hyperthermia proc, or Combustion comes off cooldown right away, you can interrupt it. That is fine. Just interrupt it after the next tick that you see. But you don't have to interrupt it if you don't want to. This is completely optional. Very, very marginal kind of gain thing. So it's really just about like making sure you get the cooldown reduction out of it. That's the big thing. Also, if you don't have a proc, do not interrupt it. Okay, that's not a good idea. Want to make sure that you are letting that thing fully channeled. The way I approach it is whenever I'm shifting powering, no matter if I need a shimmer or not, I'm always taking my camera and I'm looking around for a spot where I can shimmer ahead of time. That way, if I need to shimmer during the shifting power, I can, because I really don't want to interrupt it unless I have like a proc or cooldowns. Another common question is, when do I Flamestrike? The answer is 5 targets. That's a simple answer, but it's a bit more nuanced than that. So depending on how long the pack is going to live, you can actually use Flamestrike at 4 targets instead. So as you can see here, this is a 40-second sim versus a 5-minute sim. You'll see the red line here, the solid one. This is Flamestrike versus Pyroblast. Flamestrike overtakes Pyroblast in this case at 4 targets, even though you're not getting full value out of Unleash Inferno from it and Kindling. It is actually good to do this at 4 targets, 40 seconds. But at 5 minutes, if the pull is going really, really long, right? And if, by the way, if your pull's going 5 minutes in Mythic Plus, like something's going really bad, right? But yeah, you want to do it at 5 targets just all the time. Now, sometimes it is better to prio a target. And this is going to tell you how much of a loss it is. So like basically at 5 targets, if I were to prio the target, I'd be losing around 5% damage. And then if we bump it up to like 10 targets, it's more like, 12% damage we're losing. So it's not a huge loss to just like prio a target, but it is a loss. And as the pull becomes shorter, as the mobs are closer to death, it becomes much more of a loss, right? So just keep that in mind that as the pull is winding down, it becomes more important to maybe throw in some Flamestrikes. Personally, though, I just Flamestrike. 4 or 5 targets, I'm just going to Flamestrike unless like there's a need for me to do something else. Common mistakes. So not entering combustion properly. If you don't enter with the cast and you aren't double pyroing, then you're making a mistake. You also don't want to munch heating up in hot streak. If you do that, you will waste resources and you will run out faster. You'll get less in return, and then you'll be saying to yourself, why is my combustion cooldown so long? That is why. It's because you're wasting something. Also, you want to use all your Fireblast in combustion if possible, right? And you're not always able to, but that's the goal. You want to have all your Fireblast spent. It's insane cooldown reduction during combustion. Every Fireblast you do is giving you 2.25 seconds of cooldown reduction, plus the Pyroblast that you're doing afterwards is another 2.25. So it adds up really quickly. You can rack up like 10, 20 seconds of cooldown reduction by just blasting through those Fireblasts. So make sure you use those in combustion. That ties into the GI, right? Sitting on the GI during combustion. If you sit on the GI, you're not getting those Fireblasts. And it's for free, right? So make sure you have a Fireblast ready to spend on the GI. That way you can get those Fireblasts back and you can use them at the very end there and hopefully get a little bit more cooldown reduction. Also, if you're not transitioning between phases well, so this is a very common thing too. You're in your combustion and you're queuing up a Scorch at the end because you have like nothing else, right? But the combustion falls off before the Scorch finishes. You made a mistake there because number one, your Scorch isn't guaranteed to crit. It didn't hit inside of combustion. You basically just wasted the time there. And number two, now you're wasting Hyperthermia time that you could be spamming Pyroblast because you have a Scorch carrying over into it. So make sure that as you're ending your combustion, you have a plan for how you're going to enter Hyperthermia without accidentally getting caught in the cast, right? Biggest thing I can recommend is throwing in a Scorch early whenever you notice that like you're going to have your resources kind of running out. If you throw in a Scorch early, then you can end the combustion with the Fireblast, Pyroblast stuff. And it's much easier to kind of time it so that you don't get caught with like a hanging Scorch. And then also just like make sure you're always casting spells. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? If you're playing this game at this level, you know you need to be casting spells always. So always be casting or suffer the consequences. Other pitfalls. So if you're above 104% haste, your Scorch cast time is going to be less than the global cooldown. All right, that will break your Scorch. You can no longer double pyro with that because basically the Scorch is going to go off before you can queue the Hot Streak Spender. So you just want to get a Weakaura. I'll link in the chat later, but basically get that Weakaura. If it says don't Scorch, it's very simple. You just cast Fireball instead of Scorch in those cases. It takes a lot of haste though. We're talking like PI, Lust, and also maybe like Priory Trinket, something like that. Like you have to have like an inordinate amount of haste to reach this level, but it's still good to have the haste. It's just that you just don't want to Scorch in that case. Also, if we have Mythic Plus bosses and we have a Burden of Power or Glorious Incandescence going into boss combat with them, it will just delete them. Okay, you can go in with Spheres. You can't go in with GI or Burden of Power. It'll just steal them from you. So make sure you use those buffs up before the boss if that's going to be the next pull. You do not want to carry them over with bosses. You can carry them over in Trash, though. Trash is okay. And that, in fact, carrying them over for Trash is huge. You'll get a lot more damage out of your combustion because you're just going to get like crazy amounts of Fireblast if you carry it over. And it's like a domino effect. Like if you carry a GI in and let's say you have like 5 spheres and a GI, you're going to get 2 GIs right away on the jump. And then you're going to get a 3rd right away and then a 4th. And you can even get a 5th during that combustion. And your damage is just going to go absolutely crazy if you do that. So setting it up is just something that you want to like kind of keep an eye out for. You don't want to int your Fireblast to do that. But it is good to just track it and make sure you're aware like when the GI is going to expire and if you can carry it over. Also, too much travel time. You want to make sure that you're close to the target. If you're too far away from the target, it's going to screw up everything because everything is based on your spells hitting, right? So if you have a lot of haste, basically what happens is your global cooldown ends up less than the travel time. That's really bad. You need the travel time to always be less than the GCD instead. This is not a spec where you can lag. You will actually lose infinite damage. If you're having a lag problem, like you need to fix it or figure out something else or just like not play fire because it's that bad. Also, if you don't have haste, right? No haste. Not having enough haste will lead to significant delays. Basically, your whole loop depends on having a certain amount of cast in your combustion and getting to the next step and then building that cooldown reduction towards the next combustion. If you don't have enough haste, you're not going to be able to reach that point, and it's going to feel really bad between combustion. And that is it. Any questions?
Yeah. You showed in like a intro into combustion, assuming you have a hot streak, or like a heating up rather, with the Scorch and the combust. What do you do if you don't have a heating up? Do you just farm a heating up and then go, or Phoenix Flame?
So on the opener, you precast Pyroblast into Phoenix Flame, so you're always going to have a heating up no matter what. Sometimes you'll have a hot streak instead.
I'm talking like mid-fight. Right?
Oh, mid-fight. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so
set it up mid-fight.
If you're mid-fight, you definitely want to set it up, but let's say that like you just like had a brain fart and you're just like stupid. There is something else you can do. So this is what I would recommend if you're having that situation, this second one right here. So like Scorch, you still want to use the combustion right away, right? Like you don't want to like wait on it. So obviously setting up ahead of time is great. Like this example right here, we Phoenix Flame beforehand. That's basically the best way to set up is with a Phoenix Flame. But let's say we don't do that, right? We Scorch, we press Combustion Fireblast, we Scorch again, and then we double Pyro from there. So it's a little inefficient, but this is actually pretty good in execute, especially if the target is, like let's say that you're in execute, you have Scorch coming up, you didn't set it up, but the target is below 30% and you have improved Scorch. This will apply 2 stacks of improved Scorch while you do this whole thing too. So it's actually really nice. And in fact, if the target doesn't have improved Scorch and you don't have heating up, it's actually better to do because it gets you those 2 stacks right away.
That makes sense. And then I guess second question being, in execute and you are playing improved Scorch, is it worth to try to keep that up while in combust, or still prioritize, or like let it drop if you need to Fireblast more?
So if you end up just having like the most insane luck and you have infinite Fireblast, and you end up dropping your improved Scorch by just doing Pyroblast, Fireblast, Pyroblast, Fireblast, Pyroblast, Fireblast, that is a damage gain over keeping up improved Scorch. But that's like not really a realistic scenario. In most cases, like you're going to run out of Fireblast at some point, and improved Scorch, keeping it up is ahead of Phoenix Flame in the priority. So like you would use basically that moment, just try and like get a refresh whenever you can. And if it's like last second, you can go for it. Improved Scorch isn't like super, I mean, like you want to keep it up, right? Like it's not a terrible thing if it falls for like a short period though. As long as you have it up like during combustion, you'll probably be fine.
What about Heat Shimmer?
Don't play Heat Shimmer. Yeah, don't play Heat Shimmer because Heat Shimmer makes the rotation harder and it's the same damage and it's worse than AoE. So like, why would you play that talent? That doesn't make any sense.
Do you ever Flamestrike in raid build?
In the raid build, you do Flamestrike if you like need AoE for some reason and everything's grouped and it's like a bunch of targets and they're all gonna die real fast. But like, I'll be honest with you, man, I don't press that button in raid. I'm pretty sure getting the boss damage is always better in raid. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess, like...
Guys, hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up, dude?
Hey, man. Hey, if Fire Mage is easy, just do the thing that lets you press the most Pyroblasts.
There it is.
G.
There it is.
There it is. Back to the first slide, dude. There's the reference.
That's like 99.5% of the rotation. G.
Yeah, so like Flamestrike, I guess the only case I could see myself using it on is like on Rick Reverb if like all the bombs spawned in one spot, right? Like that kind of makes sense. But other than that, probably not.
Outside of combust, I guess like in your downtime,
yeah.
Do you care about letting or trying to keep up your field of burn, or does it really not matter at all outside of combust / hyperthermia?
Keeping up field of burn should happen naturally. But one of the cases for hyperthermia, remember going back to the slide where it was like, there's some cases where like you might Fireblast during hyperthermia.
Yeah, hyperthermia makes sense you do to keep the field
yeah, so like
right?
Whenever you're in hyperthermia, you will use Fireblast sometimes. And usually that's, okay, so there's a couple reasons why you might do this. Number one, field of burn is about to fall and you have a Fireblast and you're on a heating up, right? You can convert the heating up into a hot streak. It refreshes field of burn. We love that. That's a great reason to do it. Another reason is if you're capping on Fireblast soon, right? Let's say you're about to hit 3, or really anything over 2, because if you're at 2 Fireblasts, there is like a pretty high chance you could just overcap at any moment because of time anomaly. Time anomaly just gives you a Fireblast charge sometimes. So if it gives you a Fireblast charge, and let's say you have like this many Fireblasts here, right? Like you have like a little bit over 2, you're going to waste whatever the remainder is right there. So we kind of like want to keep it almost like back down to below 3, right? Like we almost don't want it hitting the 3 quadrant like at all. But I will say this, like sometimes it just happens. Like you can't really, like bracers for instance or GI, like those are both gonna cause it to overcap sometimes, and that's just something that happens.
AoE and Hyperthermia, do you just continue like fire blasting to spread ignite, or is it still just
So
keep up
in
what you
AoE, you're just like spamming Flamestrike, but yeah, you'll throw in those Fireblast because remember, Hot Streak gives more ignite value, so like it is still beneficial, and like Hyperthermia causes all spells to be instant and crit, but it does not cause them to be hot streaks. So there's still value in turning the spell into a hot streak. That way you can get that extra ignite damage and also keep Field of Burn up. By the way, the last reason why you might do it that I didn't cover here is because you want a shifting power right away after you get done with your Hyperthermia. So like if you're going to want a shifting power like right away, you want to end your Hyperthermia with 0 Fireblast. That way you can just immediately rip the shifting power, right? And it's easier to do that if you spend more resources during the Hyperthermia, because then you don't have to spend time trying to cycle through those resources, potentially getting procs that might screw you over for the shifting power. Also, a side note on time anomaly, since we talked about this. So if you already have combustion or time warp, it's going to force it onto the other things. So like if you're in the pull and you have like combustion up, time warp up, it's going to force it on Fireblast every time, which is actually what we want during the pull. But important to note, time warp is very specific. It's only time warp. Okay, if you have Fear of the Aspects, Bloodlust, Heroism, any other crap like that, that does not count. Like you can get a time warp proc if you have any other form of Bloodlust. It's not to the point where like I would, you know, be mad if someone else pressed lust. I would just like press it sooner next time, so I'm the guy lusting, right? Like you just want to be the guy lusting. It's about a 0.5% damage gain to make sure that it's always time warp. So yeah, try to use lust.
Relo's banned from lusting.
The mage the lust first.
But yeah, so in AoE, the way it works with ignite is whenever you have an ignite on a target, whenever I fire blast here, what's going to happen is this ignite is going to look for up to 4 targets around to try and spread to. And the sequence is, the first thing that happens is the ignite finds a target that has a lower ignite value, and it will spread to those targets. That's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is the fire blast damage gets put into a new ignite on the target. The third thing that happens is Field of Burn is gained. So like if I Fire Blast, right, I'm not getting the value out of the ignite that I put into it with the Fire Blast. I'm also not getting the increased mastery from the Field of Burn on that Fire Blast. I'll get on the next one, but that next one is also not benefiting from the damage or, you know, the stack if you don't have the stack yet, right? So there's like a sequence to it, but it's always going to start with the ignite spread. You don't really have to worry too much about how ignite works other than that. Just know it's like always looking for a target that has less ignite to spread to. And there is an incentive for you to like try and keep your target consistent. I usually target the highest health mob and I use focus kicks because, you know, you need to kick stuff, right? It's hard whenever you have to anchor your mouse in one spot the entire time you're playing. So just like, you know, move your mouse out and focus the target if you need to change it during combat, or even better, just like mark your target before combat and then just say, I'm getting the important kick or the first kick on this guy, my diamond guy, right? And then, you know, you just do that, right? And if it's like other kicks going off, maybe you go for a stop. Stops and defensives, you should definitely try to prioritize using your GCD stops and defensives like outside of combustion. And during combustion, you're going to want to prioritize ice cold and alter time, because you really want to spend like every global counts like really in a big way as fire. So yeah, alter time and ice cold should pretty much be exclusively used during combustion unless there's like a situation where you're going to die otherwise. Same goes for health pot as well.
Alter time is also really useful for getting an extra blink charge.
Yes. Yeah. So like if you shimmer twice and then you have nothing, you're like, oh God, I'm going to die. Just alter time twice, blink again. That's like a wasted the defensive value of it, but it's very good for like running back if you're, you know, if you like wiped and you have to like run to the pack or something like that and you're just slow. Because mage is really good at like short bursts. We're like sprinters. Mages are natural sprinters. I guess dwarves